That's on.
It's on.
We're on.
There you go.
Action. Let's roll. Okay.
So we're ready to go. Thank you for your persistence, everyone, for your patience. So I'll begin by welcoming our councillors and staff and those joining online, thankfully, today, and also in the public gallery. You're very welcome here. I will begin the proceedings by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today. I will ask Councillor Dukas to read the prayer, please.
Thank you. Please be upstanding for the prayer. My privilege to read the prayer today. Almighty God, we humbly beseech your blessing on the council, direct and prosper its deliberations for the welfare of the people of the Moyne Shire. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Dukas. Please note that today's meeting is finally being live streamed and can be viewed by the general public via Council's Facebook page or when later uploaded to Council's website.
Through you, Mayor. I understand it's not being live streamed, but it is being recorded.
Okay, we've been recorded.
So it'll be uploaded to the website straight after the meeting.
Okay, and apologies for those technical glitches. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. A question, will we be attempting to change that during, because I know many people were probably trying to live stream today for various reasons.
I can't answer that.
Okay.
That's just happening, Councillor Lockett. I think we'll be putting a message out through our socials that the Facebook link is down.
Okay.
And there'll be a recording afterwards.
Okay, so we have just been flexible and going with it. So we do have an apology today from both our Director of Economy and Place, is the correct title, I think, Ms. Jodie McNamara, and also an apology from Councillor Mead. And Councillor Gleeson is joining us online today. So I'll call for a motion to accept Councillor Mead's apology, please. Councillor Smith, and seconded by Councillor Lockett. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest from any councillors today? No. Any staff members? Conflicts of interest?
Through you, Mayor, 2.2.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'll call for a mover now to confirm the minutes, pardon me, of the ordinary council meeting of the 27th of June. Do we have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Lockett. Thank you, Councillor Smith, seconded. Is there any discussion in relation to the minutes from the June OCM? No? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Are all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We have got some public participants registered with us today. So I'll now call for a motion to suspend our standing orders so that we can hear our public participants. Please. Thank you, Councillor Purcell. And seconded, please. Councillor Smith. Thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. All right, so I'll first invite Mr. Mick Hearn to come forward to speak to item 2.5, the amendment C75. Is Mr. Hearn with us? No, he's not here today. That's fine. So I'll call now on Mr. Ben Druitt to speak to item 2.5, item 3.2, which is the councillor notice of motion. So if you'd like to come and sit just up in this corner chair, just in case, Mr. Druitt, take a seat. So as you know, we've got 5 minutes, so I will warn you at the floor if you like. The floor is yours.
Hey, thank you for your time, everyone, today. I'm here before you, not just as a singular voice, but as a representative of a vast segment of our community who are deeply concerned about the potential consequences of seismic blasting along our beloved coastline, and they do so for a myriad of reasons. Indigenous communities have an ancient and profound connection to sea country. Fishermen want to protect their fisheries. Greenies don't like the damage seismic does to the marine ecosystem. Tourists value the natural beauty of Port Fairy, and other normal people think it's beyond time to say goodbye to frontier oil and gas. In just 2 public events, our group Fight for the White Port Fairy collected petitions signed by over 500 people regarding their opposition to seismic blasting. In addition to this, I have a signed letter from key people across fishing and the aquaculture industry in Moyne Shire who reject CGG and indeed any company that plans to use seismic blasting for frontier oil and gas exploration. Councillors may argue that this issue is not in their jurisdiction, given that such projects are planned and approved at the federal level. To that we say that seismic blasting does not obey federal boundaries. Indeed, CGG predicts damaging sound levels on our southern beaches if their plan goes ahead in Port Fairy. Nor do animals that call our ocean home obey federal boundaries. The ocean is an interconnected system where damage in one area can have effects in areas separated by a great distance. And yet, while what you decide here today may have no legal standing, that does not mean it can't have an impact. This very council has shown leadership in the past to great effect over issues that fell outside their geographical boundaries. Such decisions only serve to strengthen Moyne Shire's brand. You may say that we need new gas to meet AEMO's projected gas shortfall in 2027. That's not why CGG is seismic blasting our coastline. It's because some bureaucrat said it was okay for them to develop a plan to do so. And the leaseholders here see a stable sovereign nation that they can make a quick buck out of. I find it more than slightly incongruous that Australia can be the biggest gas exporter in the world, while at the same time, eastern states like Victoria are exposed to potential shortfalls, leading to plans to seismic blast our coastline. And with a poor domestic reservation policy for gas, consumers and industry can be exposed to extraordinary energy prices because of a war on the other side of the planet. This is not energy security. We have the pipelines, we have the gas. What we have is a political problem. And we've got a gaggle of multinationals willing to take advantage of us. Councillors may also correctly point out that seismic blasting has occurred along our coastline for decades. Indeed, I have a letter here also from Max Dumsney, former Harbour Master of Port Fairy, recounting his experience of finding a significant number of dead cooter fish lying on the beach in Lura Bay at the same time seismic blasting was being conducted with TNT along these shores 30 to 40 years ago. For decades, seismic blasting has been out of sight and out of mind, and the damage seismic has done over the decades is largely unknown. The cumulative impacts of successive seismic surveys over the same spots is unregulated and unstudied. And just because it's been happening for decades doesn't mean it's okay. Times change, and I think everyone in this room would rightfully condemn harpooning whale calves, as has happened in Port Fairy's Bay in the not so distant past. The more science that is done around seismic blasting, the more we learn about the very real, very negative. 4 minutes. Okay. I'll finish. The very real and very negative effects it has on our oceans and its inhabitants. Ultimately, Moyne Shire councillors are here to represent the people, and there's no doubt that the people have spoken. There's every reason to support Councillor Lockett's motion. Seismic blasting across our coastline is all risk and no reward for Moyne Shire.
Thank you, Mr. Druitt. Appreciate it. And just for councillors' benefit, I'm informed we are now live streaming on Facebook, so which is great. So welcome to those who are joining us online. Okay, are there questions for Mr. Druitt, please? Any councillors? Councillor Lockett?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, Ben, and thanks for the work you do for our community. We often advocate for wind farms and the cumulative impact that wind farms have within our Shire. What would you say the difference is here?
I think obviously the difference is renewables. I mean, we all know that we need to have energy, and getting energy is never a zero impact game. I think that the Shire is punching above its weight when it comes to wind farms, and maybe the northern reaches, the farmers are unduly taking more of that impact. So I think any project, including the massive offshore wind projects that are planned by the federal government off our coastline as well, they need to be considered in the same stringent way, the effect on the environment, We're not going to give a green stamp to any energy project that gets put up just because it's renewable. But I do think we do need energy, and we're going to have to carefully plan how that looks. I think having both large-scale offshore wind farms and a new gas precinct really complicates the planning process. I think we need to really focus on the right way of doing this for the future energy needs of our region and the state.
Go ahead, councillor Lockett.
What is it about seismic testing and 3D testing that is so damaging to marine life?
Well, in the past, seismic blasting was conducted in 2D, which means the boat ran up and down with a set of streamers and let off regular blasts to get their picture, and that gave them slices of the geology underneath the water. They would develop a plan of where to drill. 3D sends a cone out, much higher levels of sound and much denser lines, and so they're trying to get all of the geology. They'll get reflections of all parts of the seafloor, not just single lines. And so there is no place that animals can escape. There's no pot luck that they'll miss the seismic blast. All areas will cop it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. You answered a lot of my questions in your presentation, which is great. What do you intend to do with the petition? Have you got any plans for that?
Well, in the Fight for the Bike campaign, the petition is very central to the campaign. We built that up over a number of months. We felt that this campaign was a little bit different in terms of our approach, because this is a battle, right? Seismic blasting is a war, and it's been happening for decades, and these projects will continue to land on our shores. So we were happy to collect these signatures, and they came very fast. When we're confident we can get a lot more. When we have a lot more, we'll certainly table it in the future. But I think on the weight of numbers that attended our event on the weekends and the weight of people's interest, I'm sure your email inboxes will be testament to that. I think that's enough to convince you that you'll be representing the people on this issue at this point.
It's probably better to table it to the federal parliament rather than to your local government.
Yep.
And maybe to the local, without sort of putting it on to Mr. Turn, but it may be worthwhile doing it to Dan rather than to us, to show the support for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, our group is but a small part of a broader campaign that's happening at the moment, and the broader campaign is certainly operating on that federal election cycle and talking to people there. So, is it possible to table it to both places?
We'll get some confirmation for that for you about that. Thank you. Did you have a question, Councillor Lucas? No.
Yes, thank you. Talk about potential damage. Have you got any evidence of damage to date of any sort?
To our local fisheries?
Local fisheries or anywhere else?
I mean, when you talk to local fishermen, like cray fishermen, certainly they can anecdotally testify that their catches have been affected by previous seismic blasting. If you're talking in general about the effect of seismic blasting on specific species, like the southern rock lobster, certainly there is scientific papers available which demonstrate that there is a real impact to these species and a real impact, like specifically to their righting mechanism and then vulnerability to predation that follows on from that. So it's one of those things where the ocean is so complicated and there are so many species that when they do studies, it's very, very specific for areas and species. So we don't know a lot, but what we do know is quite convincing that seismic does have real and damaging impacts on the marine ecosystem.
Right. So follow on, Mayor, thank you. So when was the last time any seismic testing was done along the coast?
Here?
Here, oh, well, I mean, in the Port Fairy area down to Peterborough, Port Campbell, etc.
In 2019, there is, and as I said, this is just a battle, right? This single plan by CGG is a battle. There's a war going on. Most of the broader campaign is focused on a company called TGS, who is doing a massive 55,000 square kilometre seismic survey a little bit further out from Tasmania across to the border. These guys seismic blasted across our coastline in 2019. They are currently under criminal investigation by the Department of Justice for not doing what they said they do in the environmental plan. They blasted over the Bonnie upwelling. They didn't follow soft start procedures, and the whale monitoring procedures that they put in place were found to be ineffective and not properly implemented by the regulator. These are the companies we're dealing with. It's been out of sight, out of mind for so long that they basically just do what they want once they start, regardless of what they've said they do. This is what we're trying to expose and make these companies accountable for.
So, couple more, please. So in 2019, what type of seismic blasting did they use compared to what's proposed now?
2D.
2D, and which is done how? With what type of a blast?
It's done with air cannons, but the air cannons are operating at slightly lower levels and hitting only a smaller subset of the bottom versus 3D, which hits it all.
So what's proposed now is a 3D.
Yeah, that's
Which-
right.
Each blast covers a wider area.
Well, they'll do it. They'll do the runs, the boat runs, so that the blast covers all areas.
Right.
They'll have overlaps between the cone that comes off, and they'll go back and forth with a tighter number of lines to cover the entire bottom.
Which in 2019 was different because it was just more line
That's
by
right.
line.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So that, and the lines were quite spaced, but still, I mean, they went straight over the Bonnie upwelling, and they ignored all of the procedures, not all of them, but a good number of the important procedures that they put in place to protect the marine ecosystem, which is why we're actually able to know so much about what CGG is doing for this plan, is because the companies are now mandated to have much more open public consultation, so we know much more about what they're doing.
Right. And one more. So there was a Senate inquiry into seismic blasting or testing. You're familiar with that?
I haven't read the whole thing. I've read some of the.
You read some of it. So what's your view on that report?
Well, I note that the number one recommendation, the outcome of that parliamentary inquiry was that companies seriously consider other technologies,
Right.
alternatives to seismic. The very first recommendation. And so we need to see that these companies, such as CGG in the environmental plan, are not just paying lip service to that recommendation, are actually looking for alternate technologies to use, which are not as damaging to the marine ecosystems. And they are available. These companies just don't want to spend the money because they've already got the capital in the equipment they've got.
Yeah, the gear's sitting on the.
That's right.
There in the boat somewhere.
They want to use it.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Druitt? No, thank you very much for your presentation today.
There, if I may,
Sorry, councillor, go ahead.
Councillor.
yeah, just if I may, just to follow up on your letter from the local fishing industry.
Yep.
I noticed in one of the presentations they talked about this was at the Star that night. They mentioned that they offered compensation. The fisheries, the fishing industry themselves talked about that.
Well, the fishing industry used to take compensation. I mean, the crayfishermen in Peterborough have taken money to be paid out for their season. The beauty, they have to work, or they went and worked anyway and got twice as much. They don't take it anymore. I mean, the Apollo Bay crayfishermen don't take it. And the reason being is that one season's compensation isn't worth the medium term and longer term damage it does to the fisheries.
So you just said, so they only get offered one season's compensation.
Only the proportion of the area that's covered by the seismic survey as a proportion of what they would have made. That's right.
So if in fact the rock lobster industry was wiped out, the local fishermen would be entitled to one season's compensation.
No, if the seismic blasting occurred over 100% of that fisherman's area, they'd be paid out 100% of their income for that season, and they wouldn't be able to fish it.
Just to follow up, at the presentation at the Star that night, the chap spoke about we have an acceptable level of, I don't know, was that in relation to collateral damage, or what's an acceptable level?
ALARP, the industry uses ALARP as low as reasonably practicable, right? And they decide what that is. And so NOPSEMA tells them if their assumptions are correct. What it means is quite open-ended. They just got to do a best effort at not causing too much damage. And they've got to be recoverable, localized and remediable, I think, are the three criteria. Yeah, so we've got a different acronym for Fight for the Right Port Fairy, and that's ADAP, as difficult as reasonably practical. And that's what we want to make their job. They've got to be accountable for the damage they're doing. And if they can do what they need to do with less damage, then they should be spending the money to do that, not being cheapskates.
Okay, thanks again, Mr. Joy. Appreciate it.
Does anyone want a copy of the industry letter? We've got one.
I think we've all got that electronically.
All right. Some people like paper.
Yes,
Yeah, I like paper.
some people do.
Thank you.
That's what the trip has.
Thanks, guys.
Right? Yeah. No, take one. Anyone else want one?
Oh, fine, thank you. Thank you. Now, I believe that Mr. Michael Hearn is now here, and if you'd like to come forward, please, Mr. Hearn, in relation to item 2.5, amendment C75 Rivers Run in Port Fairy. Hello, Mr. Hearn. Please take a seat just over here on the. I believe you presented to us before, so you know the drill. 5 minutes.
Yes.
And I'll give you a warning at the 4-minute mark.
Yes, no, thank you. Again, Mayor, fellow officers and all councillors, appreciate the opportunity to represent. Yeah, we've been on a very long journey with our proposal, which is known as C75, our combined rezoning subdivision out of 1698 Princess Highway. And it's been well exhibited, well publicised. People have got mixed comments, varied comments, and where we sit very passionate towards delivering the subdivision. We believe the subdivision has got things in it for everybody within the town. Obviously, no sod of soil gets turned, no sod of soil gets turned without some controversy, and that's from a small block to a bigger block. Just on the scale of the subdivision, it's interesting because that's flagged a little bit of commentary. And if we look within the last, I suppose, 20 years, there's been similar sized, one delivered at Baden Powell, one delivered at Regent Street, two in Koroit, and guess what? They're filled up with local families, elderly, mixed communities, and they all can contribute. They're not what I'd call holiday camps for anybody, very little in those subdivisions. Where this particular subdivision sits, it's about a 98% occupied residency around it, and I believe in what we're offering will go some way to filling the voids that sit within the town at present. I also happened to read a small article in the Standard today, which I was incensed by a comment that we're tokenly putting 5% towards social housing. I'd be the first developer within probably this side of Geelong, and checking with other planners, they'd agree, that have actually put anything forward for social housing. And I'm very passionate about delivering it, and I'm happy to open up that conversation for providers in the area, and would even look at probably increasing those numbers, for fulfilling the needs of the local community. When I look at other comments around types of houses, some people say we should have more of this, less of this. It's basically a subdivision that's designed to suit affordable living, and it's what we're really lacking in the town is affordable family living and generational, that families can stay there. I've got 4 kids. I've got one that's got 3 kids that go to both schools and go to St Pat's, and happens to be married to a local footy coach, which is great. They live in town and we've rebirthed. But generationally, I really worry to where the town's going to finish. In just the last couple of days, I've made inquiries to both the primary schools. Both of them have fallen off roughly around about 10 to 15%. They're dropping classes because the numbers aren't there to support it. And I believe that the town has the opportunity to move forward. I commend the council in moving forward with their structure plan. I feel it gives a number of sites opportunity over time to be delivered and actually develop the community within a community. Yeah, and I've been 44 years in the game of delivering projects around Port Fairy, commercial, housing of all types, and I'm very passionate about delivering this project.
That's 4 minutes. Are you finished?
Yep.
Yeah, good timing. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hearn. Questions from councillors around this? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hearn. Thanks for your presentation. Very supportive of social welfare / welfare housing. How will this be delivered on the ground?
Yeah, okay. So we would provide the finished subdivision, and we would sit down with the likes of a third party and see what the needs, the requirements are within the town, and we would hand the land over, no strings attached for their delivery of what the needs are.
So, sorry, through me. So a third party will be administering.
Yes.
Yep. Has this been done before, or do we have a model that we?
Not within. I'd say that there is other providers that are actually buying sites, developing sites, and handing them off to other parties to run. I'm purely the developer here, offering land for the needs of local social housing.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Purcell.
Thank you, Mayor. Commend you on that initiative. The recommendation here, which may be passed as a motion or not, I'm not sure, is actually to ask the minister to take it to a panel. Now, this has been going on for a long time. Is that the method you would like it to go to at the moment, to that panel? Is that your preferred option?
Yes, I think with community concerns is that it gives everybody hearing. I believe the panel C69 coming out very aligned to where we sat, and I think it gives probably everybody a chance to have their say. Yes, I'm frustrated it's taking this long, but it is, it's a bureaucratic process. I'm within the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Hearn. My question is regarding Sun Farmer. We get, a few comments about that, and just wondering what kind of mitigation measures the proposed site would go to assist with, noise and sound and all the things that go with that.
Yep, that's a good question, Geordie. Is in regards to the Sun Farmer site, and it's been identified within a buffer zone. It basically then gets back to what is the right separation distance between residential living and a pharmaceutical plant. And essentially, I'm not the expert in this case. We've engaged those experts. Those experts have basically the best in the business. They've done the testing, come up with what we call a satisfactory separation distance. And if we are successfully moving forward to a panel, we'll let the panel tell us what that should be.
Thank you. Further questions? All right. In that case, thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll now call on Joseph and Anna Kennedy, if they are in the gallery, to present. Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Yeah. Thank you. So as with previous presenters, you've got 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My wife Anna and I operate a dairy farm in Garbock, directly neighbouring the proposed Swanson's Lane wind farm. We currently employ 5 permanent full-time staff and 8 staff during calving. 3 of our 5 permanent staff currently need permanent accommodation. That's 60% of our workforce. Due to Planning Amendment BC 212, my ability to build critical worker accommodation on my own land to support our business is now uncertain. Today, I wish to petition Moyne Shire Council to amend the Moyne planning scheme. 1, to identify higher value prime agricultural land, such as those supporting dairy farming areas within the farming zone. 2, to enshrine protections upon those particular areas from competing land uses. An example of planning amendment contradictions. Amendment VC 202 supported rural worker accommodation by exempting certain permit requirements. You will all be familiar with this since there was consultation with councils, government and stakeholders in its creation. Now, the Minister's explanatory report for VC 202, which you all have, also states why rural worker accommodation supports planning policy. Among them, ensuring sustainable land management, preserving productive farmland from incompatible uses, and facilitating ongoing productivity and investment in high value agriculture. The contradiction, Amendment VC 212 introduced a 1 kilometre developmental setback from the project boundaries of any proposed wind farm in the farming zone. There was zero consultation on its creation. On one hand, VC 202 supports key worker housing as critical to sustainable land use, agricultural development and investment. And on the very other hand, those very same sustainability measures of our land use are apparently now no longer relevant if a renewable energy project has been proposed next door. Despite the highest quality land being the most cost efficient and the most climate efficient land to be growing our society's food, renewable energy projects are clearly being given priority over how our agricultural land is going to be used, irrespective of the food growing quality of that land. Now, our real life implications on our Garvock dairy business, for you all to see the following map. The area to the west, not covered by the overlay, is in the Yellow Swamp. The remaining part of our prime developmental area is covered entirely by the developmental setback. Now, we engaged renters in Mailers Flat more than 18 months ago to build the key worker accommodation. The deposit was paid and now $147,000 is now due. However, we no longer know if we can even be allowed to build this critical worker shortage accommodation on our own land. What we want council to do, Moyne Council does have the ability to amend its planning scheme with the approval of the planning minister. Aside from requesting the council to accelerate and approve our personal planning permit application, in the much bigger picture for the council and Victoria, we separately wish to petition council to amend that and identify the higher value prime agricultural land areas within farming zones. And we want to enshrine protections over those identified prime agricultural lands from competing land uses. This is necessary because not all agricultural pursuits in the Moyne farming zone are equal. Dairy farming typically occurs on highly productive prime agricultural land. Farms are small, output is very, very high. Labour is critical. Ongoing infrastructure and upgrades are essential to the future cost of living and climate efficiencies of our food security. Our medium-sized farm is currently sending enough milk out in local Australian processing facilities for 60,000 people to have a glass of one of the most nutritiously dense foods known to mankind.
That's
60,000 people every single day.
That's 4 minutes, Mr. Canadian.
Every day, 7 days a week. This is highly productive agricultural land, almost unmatched anywhere on the Australian continent. The impact of such setbacks as VC 212 and other competing land uses on this business dense, higher productivity land is much more pronounced and damaging when compared to larger scale, broadacre and lower input farming systems in other areas of not just the Shire, but the state. Without identification and planning protection, VC 212 and other competing land uses in prime ag areas create significant uncertainty and discourages agricultural investment in the very lands most compatible to our climate efficient growing of food. Without planning protection of our prime ag land, we will see countless more land use and climate contradictions such as VC 212 into the future within these areas so important to the future cost of living and climate efficiencies of our food production and food security. Thank you.
Before I ask our CEO to perhaps respond to the questions you've asked of us, do any councillors have questions? No?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll have
yes.
one.
Yep,
Yeah.
councillor Dukas.
Thank you. There's plenty of evidence that working close to wind farms can make you ill. Not only living next to them, but actually working close to them. If that happens to your workers, do you think they would be easily replaced? Or would you end up without workers?
I'd rather not comment on issues such as what you're saying, Jim. You know, certainly they are concerning when you're going to be next to one, but I'd rather not comment. I'd rather stick to actual legal overlays that are already here. But yes, it's concerning. And yes, if we want to talk about investment in agricultural areas, that may be one that discourages investment, which is highly needed to promote climate efficient growing into the future.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gleeson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Joe, if I could just get an opinion. What you're asking us to do is say, identify farming land that should not be specifically available to wind farms. So how do we tell farmers then that they can no longer go, you know, and have some secret deals or whatever they want with wind farms?
Well, what I'd recommend, we're talking about wind farms right now. Planning is about future. It's about what we don't yet understand. So yes, right now we're talking about wind farms because this is an immediate stage for legal competition almost on the use. What I'd like to say is Lake Patobe is there because councillors had the foresight many years ago to draw a line around it and said, let's not build buildings over that. They did the same with Faulkner Park. They did the same with Botanical Gardens in Melbourne. That is foresight. They didn't know Melbourne was going to be a 4 million plus city. And now future society has that. Yes, the wind farm is immediately critical. What I really want to say is protection of the best land that we have on this continent is critical for future generations, for it to remain free for the use of growing our most efficient food possible, because the quality of the land will not be where that land is won't change over the next generations, right? Once you've built overlays and further industries on top of that, that is very then hard to remove. Now, if there is farmers in those regions that are open to hosting such infrastructure, my personal perspective of how that would look is those farmers are likely to be the farmers less likely to be developing that land for agricultural pursuit. Such as, for example, let's take the economic example of what is good for Australia and how capitalism works is that I'm running a highly efficient dairy farm. Society needs climate efficient food, needs cost efficient food. What might be an example of a good outcome is that our business expands into a neighbouring business who are no longer willing or able to drive that hard production on that land, and they prefer to almost decommission that land from that higher output kind of farming back into that easy type of income, such as wind farm turbine incomes. Is that really an outcome for Australia if we now see that decommissioning within these highly productive farming zones for subsequent separate income streams to come in? It's less enticing for people to grow highly efficient businesses within that zone. Anthony Albanese has recently been talking about directly, and it touches on the very policy of the Labor Party, the ag policy.
Mr. Kennedy, sorry, I think we've probably answered the question that Councillor Gleeson posed, so thank you for that. Councillor Lockett, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks for your passion. Really appreciate the enthusiasm. My question is, to surmise your concerns, what would the main thing you want us to advocate for? There was a fair bit there. I just want to try and drill it down. Is it the ministerial change to protect the land? That's
basically, yes. We want the the land zones most critical for efficient food growth into the future to be first identified and then protected. Australia doesn't have much of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions?
How's it work?
Yes.
Maybe
Councillor
I'll wait for the CEO and I'll see whether,
Purcell. Okay,
if he's going to, where that goes.
nice segue.
Yeah.
Mr. Davis, are you able to respond to Mr. Kennedy's request that we amend the planning scheme?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, we'll take that on board through our planning area around the requests that have come today. There's state policy and there's local policy. And state policy is set clearly by the state. And if the local policy is goes against that grain, the state policy trumps the local policy. So BC 212 is a state policy. We've had no say in it. And it's part of the fact that the state has declared Southwest Victoria a renewable energy zone. So they have backed 212 up with the fact that they've identified this as prime renewable energy land. Your point's a valid one around viable agricultural land. The state policy also says that Moyne has prime agricultural land. It's identified that. So you've identified something that's a little bit incongruous. So we will work with our officers and come back to the council to go through that process. With regards to key worker housing, I'll stand corrected on this, but the understanding is you can still apply for a permit within the 1 kilometre.
So RE Energy has been shown to
So if you just
renege on, or they have been shown to
So-
show opposition to that.
Can I just ask you, allow Mr. Davis to speak, please?
you can apply for it. You have to then mitigate against possible noises, therefore increasing the cost of that housing if it's within the 1 kilometre the threshold, and it becomes a planning permit application where the renewable energy operator will have a say on that as well. But it doesn't rule it out. It comes to the council through a process.
Okay, does that answer your questions, Councillor Purcell?
Thank you, Mayor. It certainly does to a large degree, and because, look, I think the idea is good. I like it. And I think what the CEO is saying is that we will consider it and see what we can do for it. Yeah, but as I said, from my point of view, I like it.
You, Councillor Dugas.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start with the CEO. So if Mr. Kennedy puts his key worker housing on his farm, would there not the 1 kilometre setback apply to the wind farm when they go to site their turbines?
Through you, Mayor, if there's no wind farm there first, but in the case of Mr. Kennedy, I understand the wind farm application's already been lodged. So it's not then retrospective from that point. It's knowing where the turbines are going to go. So if you then put an application in closer to those turbines, technically, the turbine application was there first, so that would have to be assessed that way.
But the turbines are only a dot on the map. That can change over a course of 12 months, 2 years as the planning permit evolves for the wind farm. It's not set in stone, those positions. So why can't Mr. Kennedy's, I suppose, farmer housing or worker accommodation, we know where that is. It's there, bolted down. Isn't it then up to the wind farm to site? Because they've got the ability to site in various areas. You know, I think there's 100 metre, but I mean, maybe the government can, with a stroke of a pen, change that to 200 metres or 1 kilometre from existing housing.
Davis.
The wind farm application is currently with the state. We understand it's going through a more information phase, but it technically has been lodged. And it's a live application that we have to have regard to if there's another application put before us for housing.
Councillor Purcell.
Thank you. Just a quick one to the CEO. So the setback, the 1 kilometre, what is that from the turbine or from the farm boundary? The wind farm.
It's through you, Mayor. Yeah, I understand it's from the boundary.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter the tiding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing further, Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Mayor. Probably a question for Mr. Davis. Yeah, I can see the dilemma Mr. Kennedy's in with this, and probably having no forward knowledge of it. Retrospectivity, is there anything we can do to help obviously the planning permit's been lodged or in the process. Is there anything we can do regarding retrospective?
Through you, Mayor, with regard to the wind farm application?
Yeah.
No, it's being run by the state. As soon as the state's satisfied that it's more information requirements or other things are met, it then comes out to a public process and we're all in the same boat. Remembering that in these cases, the state is the planning authority when it comes to wind farm proposals.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Can I comment 30 seconds?
Sorry, Mr. Kennedy, you've had your time. I apologise, but we've got pretty strict governance rules.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of our public participation. So I'll now call for motion to resume standing orders and change the order of business. No, not.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I'll call for a motion to resume standing orders and change the order of business so that we can hear items 2.5 and 3.2 next. Would someone guess? Councillor Lockett and Councillor Purcell. Thank you. All those in favour?
Yeah.
It's carried. Okay, so we will now hear item 2.5, the planning scheme amendment C75 Rivers Run in Port Fairy. I'll call on our Manager of Planning, Building and Health, Ms. Liz Regent, to introduce this to us, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, this report considers submissions received during exhibition of Planning Scheme Amendment C75 and recommends that all the submissions be referred to the planning panel. This reflects the next step in the process of considering this amendment in accordance with the provisions of the Planning and Environment Act. The matter will then be brought back to council following the receipt of the planning panel report.
Thank you, Ms. Regent. Questions from councillors? Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is just regarding the process. So today we're basically just saying, regardless of all the different complexities with the proposal, that it goes to a panel of experts to flesh that out. Am I right in that summary?
Through you, Mayor. That is the next step. Having received the submissions, that is the next step in the process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purcell.
It probably needs to follow on from that, what happens after that.
Through you, Mayor. So the planning panel would then be called and held, and then their recommendations presented in a report. That report is then brought to council, and a council resolution is required in terms of the following step.
And council's options at that particular stage are to either accept with recommendations or reject the whole thing.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Oh, Councillor Gleeson.
Just a point of clarification, if I can. So the developers asked for this to go through to the panel, taking it out of our hands. Is that what's happened?
Through Mayor, the developer lodged the application, so it is their application, and they are supportive of going through to the next step. That is very much consistent with what they would like to happen in terms of in terms of it going through that process. That is not an option. That is the process that we have to follow in terms of the Planning and Environment Act.
So as an alternative to today's recommendations, we could say, no, we want to deal with this straight away.
Ms. Regent.
Through no, at this stage of the process, having received the submissions under the Planning and Environment Act, those submissions need to be heard by an independent planning panel in order to review their comments, council's comments, and the applicants' proposal and their response as well. And they then form a set of recommendations based on hearing all issues and all matters that have been raised.
So it has to go to a panel either way.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Sorry,
Through you, Mayor.
yes,
Just to add to that, and building on to Ms Regent's answers. Under the Act, under section 153, a panel must be appointed where a council cannot resolve submissions. So that's what's happened. It has been reported in some areas that council's handballing its responsibility. That is not the case. This is a procedural step in which a public hearing will be held, and everyone that's made a submission is invited to be part of that panel process.
important clarification. Thank you, Mr Davis. If there are no further questions, we have got a recommendation before us and I'll seek a mover for that, please. Councillor Lockett and seconded. So seconder.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Dukas.
Through you, Mayor.
Yes,
There was a wording change.
that we had discussed a wording change. I'll refer to you as the mover, Councillor Lockett. Are you happy to amend the first point to reflect the fact that we have actually considered all the submissions as a councillor? You're happy with that?
Yeah.
And the seconder, Councillor Dukas, you're happy with that?
I'm happy, but you better tell everyone what it is.
Okay, sure. So the recommendation is that having considered all submissions received prior to the date of this report in respect of Planning Scheme Amendment C75 Moyne under section 22 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, that council refers all submissions received prior to the date of this report to a planning panel in accordance with section 23 1B of the Planning and Environment Act, and requests the Minister for Planning to appoint an independent panel under Part 8 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 to consider all submissions received prior to the date of this report. And point 4, submits to the panel its response to the submissions generally as outlined in this report and the attachment. So that is the motion that we have before us. We have a mover and a seconder. As the mover, would you like to speak to them, Councillor Lockett?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the discussion that we've had and prior. Complex development, housing shortage in Port Fairy. Great to hear the social housing initiative. And regardless of people's stance on this development, this is a great process where it's going to a panel of experts, because I know we've all gone down various rabbit holes with flooding and the sun farmer concerns and things. So going to a separate panel of experts to flesh it out and then bring it back to us is a great step. Well, I'm glad is happening. So yeah, another step in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dugas.
I reserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do other councillors wish to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Purcell.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Very briefly, I'll be supporting the motion. It is a procedural step that we need to take. I like the genuineness of the social housing, like passing the land over to others to consider what social housing is, because in the past, social housing has been a word used very often, but not necessarily followed through with. So I like that process and the genuineness of that offer. And when we consider that the applicant has applied, his preference is to go through this process, I think it's logical that we accept that and give all of the people who have made submissions the opportunity to talk to a panel who will give them due consideration. So I think it's a good process.
Thanks, Councillor Purcell. Councillor Gleeson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. The application was made in June 2020, so this process will hopefully give this council the opportunity to decide whether it goes ahead or whether it doesn't. So to expedite and to, hopefully move forward, because obviously there's been a significant investment made, very supportive that we just continue to go down this path.
Thank you, Councillor Gleeson. Nothing further. Councillor Dugas, you reserved your right to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that it is an infill site. And I think that people are entitled to infill, as our planning scheme says it is, and the government promotes it. They're talking about people building in their backyards now to try and accommodate people with houses. It's not going to be a Taj Mahal type subdivision where every house is going to be $1 million and unaffordable. I can see it being middle of the road. There'll be smaller blocks. It'll be cheaper than the bigger blocks. It'll be of great benefit to Port Fairy and the community, and who knows, down the future track somewhere, we might even get a secondary school built in the area, which is much needed. I mean, we heard from Mr. Hearn that state school numbers are dropping a little bit. Well, that's only because state school kids are grown up a bit and moved on to secondary school. And if you're living in Yambak, jumping on a bus to go to Warrnambool, it's a long trip, but who knows, a nice secondary school in Port Fairy after this development starts and starts filling in will be of huge benefit to everyone. So well done to Mr. Hearn, and good luck to Port Fairy in the future.
Thank you, councillor Dukas. Lockett, Mr. Mover, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, man. I'll surmise we'll see if he holds to you to the $1 million tag there, councillor Dukas.
Well, someone talked about the golden goose at one stage.
Anyway, no further need. Thank you, man. It's a good process to take it through the panel. Thank you.
I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Councillor Gleeson, Lockett, Smith, Foster, Purcell and Dukas. Thank you. 6-0. Okay, so we now move to item 3.2. Councillor Lockett, your notice of motion in relation to seismic testing in the Otway Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll now read the motion. It's a great privilege to read this motion. That the Moyne Shire Council, Speaker, the Moyne Shire Council opposes the use of seismic testing in the continuing exploration of the Otway Basin. Point 2, writes to the Prime Minister and the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology and relevant local, federal and state parliamentarians requesting that no further permits to conduct seismic testing are issued by NOPSEMA for the area known as the Otway Basin in order to protect marine breeding and spawning areas, particularly those of the southern rock lobster. Point 3, requests that if such exploration permits continue to be issued, then a provision for reasonable compensation to affected commercial fishing businesses caused by such testing and exploration can be included in those issued permits. Point 4, establishes a temporary advisory committee to review the current Moyne Shire environmental strategy to address risks to local coastlines associated with offshore oil and gas exploration. The advisory committee should comprise two councillors, 2 members of the public selected by an expression of interest process and supported by the Director of Economy and Place. Point 5, communicates council's position to the Victorian government, the local registered Aboriginal parties and neighbouring councils. Point 6, use the period of public submission to voice strong community opposition to the current proposal by CGG to conduct seismic testing along Moyne's coastlines. That is the motion as it stands.
And do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably move it first.
Thank you, Councillor Purcell. You're moving that motion. Do we have a seconder, please, for that motion?
I'll second it for the sake of discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Dukas. Back to you, Councillor Lockett. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. What a privilege it was to stand there on Sunday with over 500 community members who were concerned about this. Children were there, many children, and that's why part of the reason
I've lost volume. I can't hear anything.
It's about an hour in, so I wonder if I'm on the hour.
Zoom.
We've been hacked.
Need hour. Oh, there we are.
Bloody Russian leader.
It appears we're back. Okay. Apologies for that small glitch. Okay, councillor Lockett, continue.
Thank you. I'll carry on.
Continue.
Seismic testing involves the use of high-powered air guns firing at 10-second intervals to create an image of the seafloor, as we've heard already today. Many local community groups, individuals, professional fishermen, fishers, and other expressed concern about this 3D testing. Please read the letters that we've had. We've been obviously flooded with emails, concerns from our community. The concerns are wide-ranging from economic impacts such as beach closures, damage to Moyne Shire's brand, as well as the impacts to the marine ecosystem, including the ecological significant Bonnie upwelling, which supports whales, tuna, and other known and unknown species, vital to their own survival. Port Fairy is home to a small but fleet of professional fishers who are concerned that their livelihoods will be negatively impacted by the seismic testing. We heard from Mr. Druitt earlier today. They may be compensated for one season. What if their entire species is wiped out? Their livelihoods will be destroyed. We heard during a recent briefing that seismic testing is known to harm sea life, including plankton and krill, sea fish, turtles, and even seabirds. We know that sound is essential to the survival of whales and dolphins and porpoises. The need for urgent action has intensified in recent weeks as the federal government's announcement of a proposed offshore wind farm and the industrialisation of our coast. It's been occurring across our Shire with wind farms for the last fair few years, and we all know very well about those concerns. We're being fed a myth that gas is a clean energy. It's a transition energy, we keep being told. Gas is a fossil fuel. Climate change is occurring at rapid rates, as we know. We are switching to renewables, and the federal and state government are doing that. But at the same time, they're exploring for gas and oil right off our very shores, 4Ks off the coast. Why are we councillors? To listen to the community. Our community clearly need and want us to oppose this. If you were there on Sunday and heard Councillor Dukas often speaks about a town hall meeting, we had a great town hall meeting on Sunday, and you could feel the passion and energy from the community there. Our community doesn't want this, and we have a right to listen to our community. I've heard some people say that it's not our issue, it's a federal issue. Well, neither are state government roads, but we strongly advocate for those. Same with wind farms. The state government have the final say on those. We absolutely need to listen to our brother that spoke earlier today about this. We will advocate for that. Hospitals, we need to advocate for them too. So clearly, if our community asks us to stand up and be counted, we will do that. And I plead with councillors to also listen to our community and oppose systemic drilling, exploration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll start by asking the mover, Councillor Lockett. You talk about in your motion, you talk about the Otway Basin, but down the bottom on item 6, it refers to the Moyne coastline. Do you want to change Moyne coastline to Otway?
Happy with that?
It's up to you. It's just item 6 says
Consistent, yep.
testing along Moyne's coastline, but up top you talk about the Otway Basin. So I just thought the Otway Basin is bigger, so
Let's bookend it with Otway. Yep,
okay.
happy with that change. Thank you.
And I reserve my right. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, councillor Dukas. Do any other councillors want to speak for or against this motion? I'll start with councillor Smith and then come to you, councillor Gleeson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to the mover of the motion, item 4. I'm just wondering, would you consider with offshore oil, gas and wind farm, offshore oil, gas and wind farm development? Because obviously
Absolutely.
there will be problems arising once it gets closer to developments. I'm just putting it out there.
Okay, and as the seconder, councillor Dukas, are you comfortable with that addition?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, councillor Smith?
No, nothing further.
Councillor Gleeson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Very valid, Councillor Smith, because I know the fishing industry are possibly even more nervous about the potential damage in relation to all the offshore wind farm. Councillor Lockett, does 0.5 need to have federal government listed as well? As you know, we indicated earlier, these are a federal issue. Communicates council vision to the federal government, Victorian government.
I think it's covered in the point that Rick asks us to write to the federal government, but it's your call, councillor Lockett.
Let's add it in. I'm appreciating the last minute editing.
Through you, Mayor, it's covered in point 2.
Yes,
Covered in point 2.
that's.
Null and void.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any, do you want to speak for or against?
Well, I do. So we write to the Prime Minister and the Minister at federal level, but we don't communicate the outcomes. Is that? But that's the only point I'm making. Mayor, I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. I was elected by, I guess, the majority of people from Port Fairy people, and I want to represent them. My big concern is that, as I mentioned earlier, these companies say there's an acceptable level of carnage, I guess, for want of a better word, and I don't think there is any acceptable level. If they can't prove that they don't do any damage, then we shouldn't even allow them in there. I'm really concerned because 2 of our major industries outside agriculture are tourism and fishing. And we should do everything we need to do to protect those. And I mean, I don't know what seismic blasting does, but it'd be a shocking if it knocked down the 7 remaining of the apostles. You know, and they're a soft rock, so I don't know whether that would happen or not. 2 of the things that convinced me, I went to a presentation at the Star of the West, and the proponents or the prospectors or whatever they want to be called just sold the company line, no different to the wind farms. But I did appreciate and accept greatly, appreciate Professor Dunbar's presentation. And when I weighed him up against what we were being told at the other side, it was a no-brainer for me. The people have asked us to support Councillor Lockett's motion. I'm happy to do so for 2 reasons in particular. One is a great friend of mine, Mick Wolf, was the mayor at the time and cast a deciding vote to accept climate change. Now, I may or may not agree with Mick on that, but he was very, very passionate about the bite. And because of him and his memory, I'm passionate about it as well. And the other reason, if I could just read for a moment, is a little letter I received, and I'm sure you received the same, from Amelia, a 14-year-old girl in Port Fairy. And Councillor Lockett referred to the number of children present the other day. So, as an impending 60-year-old, I need to think about the future for those kids. And Amelia tells us that the government has been trying to introduce sustainable power sources in and around Port Fairy for some time now. And seismic blasting to try and find gas directly opposes that idea. Part of the reason we are switching to renewables is to prevent this type of drilling going on. It is not sustainable and will eventually run out, and by then it will be too late to change. The damage will be done for us and the rest of our planet. So we need to change now. And I agree with Amelia. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gleeson. Other councillors who'd like to speak for or against the motion? I'd like to say a couple of words. I do want to start by acknowledging this is a federal issue, and ultimately this council has no decision-making authority whatsoever, but we have a voice, and this is the only opportunity we and our community have to voice our opposition in relation to seismic testing. And as councillors, I don't think we should underestimate the value and the power of standing up for what we believe to be right, just as our community has done. Councillor Duke has referred before to the 2021 Senate inquiry into seismic testing. I did read that report and it didn't put me to sleep at all. It was very interesting reading. And essentially that Senate inquiry acknowledges that we're just scratching the surface of understanding what seismic testing does. We really don't know. However, we have got some snatches of information to show that the potential damage is catastrophic. And I'll just read you these couple of statistics from page 28 of that report that details the change in commercial fishing catches off East Gippsland Lakes entrance after 1 month. 1 month after seismic survey. Flathead catches decreased by 71% and school whiting catches decreased by 99.5%. Now, if that's not a catastrophic impact, I don't know what is. So for us here in Moyne, though, what does it mean? So whether we like it or not, we are now a big part of the story of the transition to renewables. We're not an anti-renewable energy council, but we pointed out many times in this very chamber that we're already shouldering the burden of that transition. So we've already got almost 400 turbines within Moyne Shire, with another 400 in planning. And just last month, I went to a launch in Portland where Minister Bowen told us there's going to be a huge super wind farm offshore. We don't yet know how many turbines, but it's going to be big enough to power more than 8 million homes. Now that's massive. And now we're being told that on top of all of that, we also have to prop up the last vestiges of a dying fossil fuel industry. So we're just completely unfairly being asked to carry the burden of both. And there are almost no benefits because everything is exported out of our region. So I do urge my fellow councillors to join with our neighbouring councillors at Coal Lake, Otway and Surf Coast Shire, and most importantly, with our own Moyne Shire community, to send a clear message to government that seismic testing is tantamount to what one particular email described to us today as vandalisation of the Southern Ocean. Thank you. Councillor Dukas, you reserved your right.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll be voting against the motion, not because I disagree with it, but I don't have an option to be neutral. If there was another motion that supported it, I wouldn't be voting for that either. But I need to be neutral because I heard from Councillor Lockett about the beach hall meeting and all those people, and I commend them for being there. But there are also people out there who need some sort of energy. Right? We talk about coal and it's phasing out. We've heard about gas and what gas does, but you talk to people that are heavily dependent on energy, they're not really concerned whether that's a good attitude or not. They just need cheaper energy, and energy is getting dearer by the day. So for me to be a representative of the Moyne Shire, I have to look at both sides. I appreciate those that are against this seismic testing. I must also consider those people who, even though they don't have a strong point of view, all they want is energy at a reasonable rate. So I'm probably sitting on the fence, which I've never done before. But in this instance, I reluctantly will oppose this motion simply because I don't have a middle road to go down. But those who support the motion, I wish them well in the future. And those people out there that are in the industry looking for cheaper energy, I hope somehow by a responsible, sensible government, they can get it. But to date, whether it's state or federal, we've been let down by all sides of government when it comes to energy.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Councillor Lockett, we'll come back to you to sum up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your comments, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Gleeson. In my summary, I was also going to read out Amelia Dumsney's email. So power to Amelia and power to the future. Gas and oil is killing the planet. We're transitioning, and it's, as Councillor Foster, as Mayor Foster pointed out, there's 400 turbines in our Shire. We are more than carrying the brunt for renewable energies. We're not gonna, and we will not carry the brunt of gas and oil. Please, I implore you I encourage the councillors to vote for the future, for these kids and for these animals that don't have a voice. They have a voice through us. That's what we're voting on today. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Lockett. I'll now put this motion to the vote. All of those in favour, please. That is councillor Gleeson, Lockett, Smith, Foster, Purcell. Those against, councillor Dukas. Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you to our gallery. Okay, so we now move back to our agenda and we move to item 2.2, Chief Executive Officer. Oh, I beg your pardon, missed the most important part. 2.1, which is the monthly financial performance report. And I'll call on our Acting Director of Community and Corporate Services, Mr. Peter Brown, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, councillors note that Mr. Craig Ralston is with us, our finance manager, who may be able to answer some more of the detailed questions that you might have. I guess in summary, council, we've reached the end of the financial year, and this report shows that you're in a strong financial position. We do need to be conscious that we are still undertaking our end of financial year work, and so this position is indicative but not final. There's a number of additions, a number of other items in here that you might take note of, particularly that our adjusted working capital at the end of the year is very similar to what it was last year. And councillors, included in this report on page 52 is the variations list, including variations to be improved for the current month. So I commend the officer recommendation on page 37 to you, including those variations.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So questions to Mr. Brown in relation to the financial book, or Mr. Ralston? Yeah, councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification, Mr. Ralston, on the Quarry Reserve Fund. Yeah, if you look at that now and it's sitting at expected at the end of June 30, 2023, it's sitting at 2.261 million. And this may look light, but I think the clarification is that we have paid 1.764 for the new crusher machine, which is on page 87, I think. So even though the quarry reserve looks to be quite depleted, rightly so, we've just purchased a new crusher, but if things had gone to plan, it would have been sitting in the Mortlake quarry now producing stock, but with shipping problems and that. So it does look a bit miserable at 2.2, but that's with the new machine coming out of it.
Yeah, but through you, Mayor, that's correct. So the quarry crusher was in the current 22-23 budget. However, it's been delayed due to some shipping time constraints. So that will come out of the next year's budget, which will impact on that reserve. So that figure of 2.2 is at forecast 30 June will be an additional 1.7 million.
Thank you, Mr. Ralston. Further questions? Councillor Dukas.
Thank you. So with the current variations, we've been pretty lucky where one variation balances out the other one. Is that the way it reads? Is this magical accounting or is it just a stroke of luck?
Solid accounting, Mr. Ralston.
Through you, Mayor. So that's obviously there's some savings in some projects, which have been but in some other projects that require further expenditure.
Hope we can keep that up, Craig. It's pretty good. One other one, back here somewhere. On page 40, we had an adopted budget surplus of 826, which has now gone up to 952. Well, that's pretty good, isn't it? I don't know why we've got a better surplus, but if this keeps increasing by the time we get to June next year,
Through in there, so that, yeah, so the update budget takes into account the variations during the year, so there has been some ups and downs, but overall, with those ups and downs, it's fairly close to the adopted budget.
so we're going all right.
That's in terms of the budget. Our actual results actually.
Even better still. Oh, can't wait for next month.
Okay, thank you, councillor Dukas. Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a query in regard to the variations again. There's a lot of, well, there's an extra $55,000 spent on the goods shed. And under the comments, there's some there that I would have thought should have been included in the original scope of works. So my question is, was the scope not sufficient, or was the contingency not sufficient in the original budget to cover those works?
We might refer that question to Ms Farrell, the Director of Infrastructure.
Thank you. So through the Mayor, my understanding from both what's reported here and speaking to the officers is that some things were not included in the scope. We are going to provide a breakdown to a future report to council to itemise the expenditure to date and the allocation.
Councillor Purcell.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, for that reason, I won't be voting until we move a motion, but I am concerned that we're, we don't even know how much the good shed's cost us, but we know it's going to cost us another 55. Is that all that's going to be included? I understand there could be some additional cost to that. I think our treatment of variations, look, just because we haven't done some work on the RSL doesn't mean we can use that money to do something else that we never budgeted to do. It's not, in my mind, the best way to do some of these. And I think, and particularly the good shed one should have been a separate council report rather than just tacked on to the bottom of the financial as a variation. So when it gets to it, I'll probably vote against the finance report for that reason.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll note that. All right, any further questions in relation to finance? No? Oh,
Yeah,
yep, Councillor
thank
Dukas.
you, Mayor. Look, following on from councillor Purcell, a quick add up has got me to 452,000 plus the 300 activation in the future, plus a cost of a ramp, whether we go the ramp or go with something else, I don't know. And I know that the CEO promised to get us a report on how much we spent to date. But I'd just like to note publicly that I'm very, very, very disappointed in the amount of money we spent on that good shed. And if anybody looks at it, I know it's been upgraded, developed, etc., all that. But to look at that and say we've spent $800,000+ and get excited, really.
Yep, Mr Davis, I think a clarification there.
Through you, Mayor, I'm just clarifying the claims there, councillor Dukas, that we've spent $800,000 on it. I think
No, not yet.
as time as we can bring in a report to you, I have confidence that is not the figure that's been spent on the good shed to date. There was a budgeted amount of 300,000. We have run over and it's been highlighted today, and we'll bring a report back into you with the other mitigating factors around that. That's less than 20%. Most budgets, most projects have had a contingency at this stage into that phase. We will do better in terms of how we report that back to you. But the 800,000, I just, on the record, want to put out there that we're not near that figure.
No, true, but that's what I'm stating. Proposed at the moment, if I read the figures in this report, 385,811, right? Add on the 55. Then we were told there's an activation amount of 300,000. So when we spend that activation amount, unless we're going to throw it out and spend it on roads, so if you add that 300 to that, and then the uncosted cost of the ramp. So 450 and 300 is 750. So you're telling me my 800 is nowhere near the ballpark? In the future, when it's all done and the activation money spending will be 800 plus. Thank you.
So I think councillor Dugas will await the future report.
Of course, we should, yes, and keep a very tight eye on it as well.
Okay, and federal funds you, okay. Thank you, though, thank you. Anything further in relation to finance?
Yes,
Councillor
thank you,
Smith?
Mayor. Just a question regarding the Port Fairy RSL Hall. I just see money for re-stumping and the roof, and then it says that the building was subject to consideration for disposal. Has that been reconsidered and we're going to spend the money, or is the hall still in the consideration for disposal?
Is that a question perhaps for the CEO or Ms.
Sorry, I should have asked it earlier, but
Ms. Farrell?
Thank you, through the mayor. I think the reference there is in relation to the property framework that was presented to a workshop recently. And at that point in time, officers were working through of potential sites in relation to assets that could be considered for future disposal. So that is the reference. There has been absolutely no decision that site is earmarked for any form of disposal.
No, just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll seek a mover of the recommendation before us that we receive the monthly financial performance report for June, and that council approves the variations as listed under section 7 budget variations for the current month. Do we have a comment, please? Councillor Lockett, thank you. Seconded. Councillor Smith, thank you. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Great to see. I'm absolutely rapt to see how great the Good Shed is looking at the moment. We've had petitions from our ratepayers to have it renovated. It's getting renovated, and pun intended, it's looking the goods. I think it's great and good to see. Obviously, sometimes, lots of times that council, state, federal, and definitely seen at state that things can run over budget. So I think we are flexible in how that, things running over budget, and we adapt and overcome. So yeah, good to see things are happening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, very comprehensive document, and it shows that we are still in a strong financial position, even though probably coming into 23, 24, we'll probably have some headwinds getting funding from both state and federal government. But look, overall, a good report, and it also reflects the $10 million received at the end of the financial year from the Grants Commission. So if that's taken into account when you're looking at the total figures. But overall, I'm supportive of the budget, and the officers have done a great job keeping it in a strong keeping us as a council in a strong financial position. So thank you.
Thank you. Do any other councillors wish to speak for or against? Councillor.
I will be speaking against the motion. Look, agree with Councillor Lockett. The building looks great. My concern is not about the building. Don't get me wrong. It's about our treatment of the overrun. To plonk it in there with the, $55,000, and our responsibility is to be responsible, or we are voted to be responsible financially within this council. I don't think that is enough there. I think it should be considered separately, and that's the reason I do. Nothing against the Good Shed or what it is, and I'm 100%, I think it's great, but I don't think we're financially responsible to accept it just like that.
Thank you. Okay, no other councillors wishing to speak. I'll come back to you as the mover, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll agree with Councillor Purcell. It is looking the goods, and to rebuke that, it's always been done like that. Not that that's a good reason to keep doing something, but yeah, it's pretty common, I thought, but we can chat more about it by the sounds. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please. Councillors Gleeson, Lockett, Smith, Foster and Dukas, and those against, Councillor Purcell. Thank you. That is carried. We move now to item 2.2, the Chief Executive Officer and Employment and Remuneration Advisory Committee, and Mr. Davis has declared a conflict of interest in this item. Okay, so I'll ask Mr. Brown to present to this one, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This report discharges or seeks to discharge council's responsibility in relation to the performance review of the Chief Executive Officer. Under the Local Government Act, council has a remuneration and advisory committee that met on the 11th of July, and confidential minutes from that form an attachment to this report. The CEO Employment and Remuneration Advisory Committee is made up of all council laws, and the review was positive, and the recommendation to council is that council endorse the Chief Executive Officer Employment and Remuneration Advisory Committee confidential minutes and the motions contained within.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And just a clarifying question for those who may not who may be wondering why the minutes are confidential. It's the reason being?
The reason for that, Mayor, is that the items contained within the minutes are personnel information and private information, and a matter between the council and an employee.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Questions in relation to this? No? Okay, in that case, I'll take a mover that we endorse the advisory committee confidential minutes. Councillor Dukas?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Purcell. Is that you just played?
Yep.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, seeing I've been told I'll give the CEO the most grief, I'll definitely, yeah, all of that. It's a pleasure to move this remuneration recommendation. I'm not one for jumping up and down over remunerations. I think everybody, apart from me, is overpaid, but that's just a personal opinion. But having said that, no, it's been an exhaustive process. We have done a fair bit of work in what the CEO's obligations are, is what I think they call them KPIs. We now have an independent person, committee member, to oversee those deliberations and I suppose processes going forward. It's been a good discussion. I'll go as far as to say that the CEO's done a pretty good job to date because he's new in the chair. He's not a CEO from somewhere who's moved in. He's stepped up from planning. And with guidance from this council, I think that going forward he'll make an excellent CEO, and naturally people are entitled to a remuneration package plus yearly increases in that package. So yeah, happy to move the recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Briefly, I think it's a good process we go through, and I think it's good that all of the councillors are involved in it. You know, other councillors, you know, pick 2 or 3 councillors to go through it. It's one of the most critical things we do each year to make sure our CEO understands what our goals are, and he has an opportunity to tell us bits of, you know, what he's done well and what he thinks he'll do in the coming year to improve. It is a confidential report, so I won't obviously go into any of that, but I think it's fair to say that all of the motions were unanimous. And I don't think it's breaking any confidentiality to say that we were unanimous in our position in regard to the CEO.
Yes, thank you. Any other commentary either for or against the motion? No, I'll come back to you to sum up if you like.
No need, Mayor.
Thank you. Put that to the vote. All those in favour, please. That's carried 6-0.
Thank you.
Item 2.3, and we can invite our CEO back now. Item 2.3 is the MAB State Council motions. Ms. Regent, I'll ask you to introduce those for us, if you wouldn't mind.
Just had a paper.
Oh, okay. I beg your pardon. We won't put you on the spot, Ms. Regent, because we know you're filling in for us at the last minute today. So instead, I'll ask our CEO, Mr. Davis, if you could please introduce the MAB State Council motion.
Yes.
Thank you, which is item 2.3.
Thank you, Mayor.
And you'll note we did call you back.
I have been called back, so I'll take that as a tick. Thank you. Thank you for your support. So item 2.3, councillors, the next MAV State Council meeting will be held on Friday, the 13th of October. Ominous for some. And all motions must be submitted to the MAV by the 14th of August. So as we don't have an OCM until beyond that date, they've been brought forward here with discussion with councillors and officers. And so the officer recommendation is for the 3 following motions for consideration at a MAV State Council meeting. A State Council meeting, for those listening, is where mayors and CEOs and councillors who wish to come and observe, they get together at the State Council and they vote on these motions, and these motions get put up to the MAV, who then take them on board. They're either carried or they're not carried, and then they get actioned upon. And as an example, you will recall in May, councillors, we put forward a motion with regard to getting a renewable energy committee group of councils together. Since that time, we have actually had one of those meetings convened now by the MAV with more set in place. So having said that, I put the officer recommendation to you, and happy to take questions, but they are the 3 motions before you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Questions or clarification needed? Has been discussed at workshop? No, all right. We do need somebody to move that motion, please, and to second it.
Oh,
Thank you, councillor.
Come on, councillor, lift your game. We'll be here for all night.
Seconder, please, to the motion. Thank you, councillor, for yourself. Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mayor. And as earlier discussed, we need to include the words renewable energy, establishment of a renewable energy development guidelines. Is that correct, councillor Smith?
That's correct, councillor Dukas.
Okay, thank you. So I moved it.
You're happy with that, councillor Purcell?
More than happy,
Thank
man.
you. Yep.
You obviously seconded. Okay, as outlined by the CEO, it's probably 99% a procedural matter. We've got the submissions in front of us. We've workshopped them. I can see them having a lot of support by other rural councils in the same position as us, and hopefully we can get some traction. I think it's a good outcome. It'll go to the MAV, but will we get anything out of the MAV? But that's not what we're here to discuss today. But I'll just reiterate the fact that I'm disappointed the MAV, when it comes to rural issues, don't fight as hard as they should. Anyway, having said that, that's all I'll say.
Thank you, councillor Dukas.
I'll reserve my right, Mayor.
Other councillors wish to speak for or against? No, we'll come straight back to you.
If not, I'm happy with what councillor Dukas has said so far, and I'll let him summarise.
In summary, a good outcome for Moyne Shire. We'll get support through other rural councils, and going forward, we're going to have to put pressure on the MAV. But that we'll leave that up to the CEO to come back with a plan of doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried 6-0. Thank you very much, councillors. Item 2.4, rates collection and hardship policy. Mr. Brown, I'll ask you to introduce this one, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this policy is to provide a framework for efficient and effective administration and collection of outstanding rates and charges. Council has an existing rates collection policy that does refer to financial hardship, but this updated policy combines rate collection and the rate collection provides further details regarding financial hardship and our assessment processes and our approaches to deferral payments, payment plans and waivers of interest and legal costs. The state government has committed to developing a training and guidance material around this about developing financial hardship policies, but this has been outstanding for quite some time, and it's important that Moyne move ahead and develop a policy, and that this policy can be reviewed in a year or so's time when we have further advice from the state government. I think our processes at the moment are very sound, but they it's important they're backed up by a strong policy. I note this policy has been taken to the Audit and Risk Committee, which endorsed the policy at its meeting on the 12th of July. And I commend the recommendation to you that council adopt the draft rates and collection hardship policy.
Thank you, Mr Brown. Any questions from councillors? No, that being the case, I will seek the mover of the recommendation that council adopts the draft rates collection and hardship policy. Do we have a mover, please? Councillor Smith?
Yep.
And seconded, councillor Purcell. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This gives us the opportunity to move forward with efficient and effective collection of outstanding rates. Council has two options. One is deferral and one a waiver. Deferral goes through to understand the process when we defer our rates. Council policy is not to waive rates because this can give the owner a potential source of funds if the property is liquidated. But we also need to consider with waiving, probably there's often interest and legal costs involved. So that will be considered to be waived, maybe at the discretion. But look, it's a comprehensive document and it gives our officers guidelines to go forward with deferral and waiving of outstanding rates. Thank you.
Councillor Smith. Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I have comfort in this had been to the Audit and Risk Committee because as we know that there's a good deal of expertise in risk and their expertise is certainly appreciated. I think it's a good document in that it allows us to work with anyone who has hardship or issues with payment of rates, or fees or charges. And it doesn't automatically just say we're going to take them to court. And I think from all of our point of view, that's our last resort. And, I know that's the position of the officers. And from my point of view, I don't think we should, that is the absolute last resort. And it does, the hardship policy does include, consideration of that. So I wholeheartedly support this policy.
Thank you, councillor Purcell. Opportunity now for any other councillors to speak for or against the motion. If not, I'll come back with you, councillor.
Sorry, Mayor. I'd just like to say that, put simply, the process goes from the rates officer to his superior, which would be the Director of Corporate Services, then to the CEO, and the CEO discusses any issue with the councillors. So if anybody out there has any issues with paying rates for whatever reason, they can have confidence that between the CEO and the councillors, things will be resolved in the best interests of everyone. And I mean, to date, we've done very well. Our rates officer over the years has been very good, not only through COVID, but in earlier days with things tough in the agricultural industry, etc. And we've come through pretty good. I've never had anybody come to me and say that, the Shire is too hard on. Not one. So congratulations to the personnel in the race department, because it's not easy sometimes, because sometimes you're dealing with people in a difficult position. So well done to them. And the system going forward, I think, gives them the opportunity to know that the councillors are there if they need them.
Thank you. Yeah, well said. Thank you, councillor Dukas. Nothing further. We'll come back to you as the mover, councillor Smith.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mayor. No, look, I think it's a good document and it gives us a chance to address outstanding rates in a fair and equitable ways, which I think all councillors would agree is a good outcome for our ratepayers, especially ones suffering hardship through often no reason of their own. So I commend the motion to you.
Thank you. We'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour, please. That is carried 6-0. Thank you. We've already dealt with item 2.5. We move to item 2.6, the Hexham Wind Farm environment effects statement, scoping requirements, and I'll ask our manager of energy projects, Michelle Granger, to introduce this. Please.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Hexham Wind Farm is a proposed wind farm. It's centrally located in our Shire. 109 turbines at the moment, with the turbines being 260 metres tall. The Minister for Planning has directed that the approvals or assessment process for this project is an environment effects statement. So an EES is what we call it in its shortened form. And the document in front of you is that the Minister has released the scoping requirements, so what the EES should look at, so what technical studies, what expert reports are needed in order to assess what are the environmental, what are the social, and what are the economic impacts and benefits of this project. The scoping requirements are on public exhibition with the Minister for calling for comments from both council, the community and other stakeholders. What you've got for you is a report that outlines the framework for that assessment and where I think council could add value to the scoping requirements. A lot of them relate to actually requiring consultants to audit some of the projects that already exist in our Shire, so that we're not relying purely on models to generate the impacts. We've got 7 operating wind farms. We've got enough experience of what impact they have on our landscape, what impact they have on bird and bats, what are the noise impacts, in order to contribute and get a better result from this EES by making sure we're using real-time and factual data rather than just modelling. So there's a draft submission attached, and we're seeking your approval to send that submission to the Minister for Planning.
Thank you, Ms. Granger. Thank you. Councillors, do we have questions? Councillor Dugas?
Yeah, I have one, thank you, Mayor. To Ms. Granger. And hopefully she can answer. It's a strange one. On page 667, that's the DECA report, whoever put it together. Matters to be addressed in the CES 3.1, 3.2, content and style. The 1, 2, 3, the 4th draft point says a description of feasible alternatives capable of substantially meeting the project's objectives that may also offer environmental or other benefits, including the basis for any nomination of a preferred alternative. Now, if I was part of this, I would say, are anybody looking at nuclear as a preferred alternative? Or is it just one of those nice little statements? I mean, I don't expect you to have the exact answer, but if you want to answer, if you don't, because it's a weird one.
No, I think from council's experience, this will be our 3rd EES that we've gone through in recent times. So Dundonnell, Willatook and this one. And while we're still waiting for a decision in Willatook, what we've seen is that requirement to look at alternatives has seen the project scope change between when it's exhibited as the scoping requirement and when the project actually goes on exhibition, and then when a permit is issued. So we're actually seeing that if environmental issues are picked up, then turbines are removed from a certain area of the site. The layout changes. So I think including those grounds actually has led to some positive results for other projects.
So when they say alternative, they're not talking about alternative energy that doesn't need as much area or any vegetation removal. They're talking about, I suppose, massaging the process to make alternatives less incumbent.
Yeah. And probably one success that council's had in this regard is, pushing for on-site quarries to reduce the impacts on our roads. So now that's a standard requirement to have a look at, rather than it not being an alternative that is discovered throughout the process.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a comment, if I may. We had a motion before us earlier about seismic testing and stuff. And we talked about we don't get consulted until it's after the event and all that. In this report, Ms. Granger highlights the fact that we have lived experience and they should be shared and they should be taken notice of. And I'd just like to commend her report. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gleeson. If there are no further questions, the motion before us is that council provide a written submission to the Minister for Planning on the scoping requirements for the Hexham Wind Farm Environment Effects Statement, generally in accordance with the draft submission attached to this report. I am looking for a mover, please. Thank you, councillor Dukas. Seconded, councillor Smith. Thank you, councillor Dukas.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As councillor Gleeson said, the submission's pretty good. I mean, it can't cover everything because what's the saying? We know what we know what we don't know, but whatever the rest is.
You got
it half right.
Well, I won't, the bit I got right is the only bit I worry about. Anyway, yeah, having said all that, it's a work in progress really, because we don't know what's going to come up. So we're in there, we're in the ball game, and we're going to have a red hot go to make sure that everything's done as well as can be done.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. But the draft submission is a very comprehensive document. I think the officers should be commended for putting this together. It comes with prior knowledge of, I think, 7 wind farms in the Shire, but, with the main things, cumulative impacts adjacent to 2 other wind farms, environmental assessments, bats, brolgas, wetlands, infrastructure, as was spoken of earlier with regarding roads, which we see as a major impact on local rural communities when these things are built, right through the planning, development and into production stage. The land use outcomes where these go, and I think the Minister really needs to be made aware of these things, the social and economical advantages or disadvantages. And lastly, noise. I think this is something that we're all aware of with these very large wind farms coming in and surrounding our local communities. But look, I'm very keen, supportive of the draft submission to the Minister.
Thank you, councillor Smith. Opportunity for councillors to speak for or against motion. No, there being none, I'll come back to you, councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, yeah, I've heard from everyone. Everyone's talking positive. I'd just like to add that maybe from what we heard today about Mr. Kennedy, that some of what his concerns were could be put into this somehow. I don't know if it can. Our CEO would know more than all of us in that respect, but maybe that's something we can look at going into the future. But all we can do is give it our best shot and protect the people around the wind farm area and the community in general and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Dukas. Okay, I'll put that to the vote now. I'll just wait for councillor Smith to shimmy back. All those in favour, please. That is carried 6-0. Thank you. Item 2.7, the 2023 Southcombe Use and Development Plan. It's also referring to Southcombe Park, Port Fairy, and I'll ask Ms. Farrell, our Director of Infrastructure and Environment, to introduce this plan.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So, councillors, the Southcombe Use and Development Plan that you have before you is the culmination of extensive engagement with users at Southcombe Park. The key purpose of the plan was really to assess current and future use, build consensus around issues and opportunities amongst those stakeholders that utilise the site, and look to develop a set of priorities for future investment and integration of infrastructure. So the plan is broken up into 4 different categories with a set of key objectives under each of those categories. It is a long-term plan in terms of setting the long-term vision for the site and the precinct overall. It's not committing council to any particular funding of any of the components noted in the plan, but rather setting a path or a roadmap for the committee to pursue the priorities as they see fit into the future. So recommendation on this report is for council to note this plan that will guide the Southcombe Park precinct user groups for key projects going forward.
Thank you, Ms Farrell. Do we have any questions? Councillors? Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess it's a question. We've had another group looking at our playground strategy, and then we've had a group looking at the future uses of the Southcombe Park. Do they talk to each other? Because the playground strategy says we should be here and here, and the skate park should be there. Is there communication between those two groups? Because it's not reflected in this report.
So thank you, Councillor Gleeson. Through the Mayor, absolutely. We've put the consultants in touch with each other, and the spatial arrangement map that's gone out in regards to the playground and skate parks, that consultation just closed yesterday on, aligns pretty well with what's in this plan. That's in its current state. Obviously, we need to now consider the feedback in that consultation that's just occurred and bring that back to council, but absolutely they've been in touch with each other all through the process.
Okay, there don't seem to be any further questions, so we've got do we have a mover for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Lockett. Seconder, please. Councillor Purcell. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Really excited for this plan. It's not a master plan. I haven't read that the other day. It's a real hub of Port Fairy, and I think it's going to grow and develop. And as Councillor Gleeson pointed out, with the proposal skate park and playground area there, I think they can really tie in and will tie in with this plan. The community feedback, I think, so far has been really positive. There's many user groups of it, so I think it's great to get all their kind of input and make sure we're all on the right track, and will help us for future funding opportunities coming forward. And congrats to the consultants, but also to the staff, because I imagine the staff give the consultants a hell of a feedback and probably do a lot of the work. But yeah, massive congrats to the staff, but also all those user groups and all the volunteers that make up those user groups. There's a wonderful bunch there. So big congrats to everyone. Very exciting stuff.
Thank you, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd echo those remarks. Because it is such a lovely area, there's so many people want a part of it. And if you don't have a bit of a plan or a detailed plan, they're going to sort of pick bits and want to do bits. And this is actually something that desperately needed, so that we have some direction. And if you don't know where you want to finish up, you've got no hope of getting there. And this is saying this is what we want it to be. So I totally support Councillor Lockett and also the officers on what they've put in front of us, because I think it does give us the opportunity to get where we and the community need to be.
Thank you. Other councillors, would you like to speak for or against this motion? No, I'll come back to you, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Very well advised by Councillor Purcell. No further need. Thank you, Mayor.
I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour? That's carried 6-0. Item 2.8, Koroit Township Renewal Growing Regions Funding Application. And again, to you, please, Farrell.
Thank you. So through the Mayor, this report in front of you today is officers seeking approval to submit a funding application under an expression of interest process to the Growing Regions Fund, which is a federal fund on a dollar-for-dollar arrangement. This follows more recent, well, there's been extensive consultation over the Koroit Streetscape project over the last number of years, but more recently there's been some targeted consultation with traders and residents in Commercial Road. We put out about 65 letters and got a return of about 19, which represented a 29% return rate, which was a significant rate. So we were really trying to test options with that community about, do we proceed with the $1 million that council has committed to the project currently, or wait and use that money to leverage it for a bigger request to growing regions. So there was mixed commentary that came back, and the direction from council was to consider both options combined, essentially. So this report reflects that. We are seeking to now put a submission into the growing regions for a $4 million amount, which is 2 million from council and 2 million from federal, as well as recommendation 3 in the report indicating that we would go forward and spend the $1 million that we have in reserve and commence the project in this financial year. So it really is a win-win in terms of the feedback that came back for the community, and the final recommendation is providing authorisation that, should we be lucky enough to be invited to put a full application in, that we go forward with that, which we would know by the end of the year. So it's really a procedural report in terms of providing us the mandate to go forward and make that application.
Thank you, Ms Farrell. We have had lots of discussion around this. Councillors, questions of clarification, please. Councillor Purcell.
Probably just a clarification, just so that we all know where we are. So under this proposal, the undergrounding of the power lines is not included?
Correct.
Okay, so that is
off the table.
Off the table.
Yes.
Thank you.
And through the mayor, so that conversation occurred prior to that last lot of community engagement with the Koroit District Progress Association to get their sense of, sentiment in the community about delaying to wait for that to occur, or just go on and try and get something done now.
So basically to get things moving and, get the works done, they were in support of abandoning that part of the project.
Yes.
Thank you.
You other questions? Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. Absolutely supportive of this. They've been waiting a long time, so it'd be good to get some more work done. I'm only getting limited information through in relation to the cancellation of the Commonwealth Games. So in light of that fact, I know that there's been other monies promised. So can we take advantage of any other schemes on offer that would help us to get this renewal done?
Errol or Mr Davis?
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Gleeson. The details of what is applicable and what isn't at this stage haven't come to fruition. We know that there's a number of buckets of money out there, and we'll certainly be looking at options once the guidelines are released.
Thank you. Thank you. So just to follow up, so if I'm reading this motion or this report correctly, we're prepared to find $2 million in next year's budget if matched by federal government.
That's correct.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Very supportive.
Councillor Purcell.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think just in regard to the Commonwealth funding, I think it's probably worth saying that we've already had discussions about that. We're already fairly active at looking at projects that we believe may well fit into the funding that's become available. So, we're well ahead of the pack in regard to identifying that, and it will be something that the council will be discussing in the next week.
Absolutely. Okay, if there are no further questions, we do have the officer recommendation as outlined by Ms Farrell. Is anyone prepared to move this? Please, Councillor Dukas, seconded. Councillor Lockett. Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a great outcome. Now, we've been a lot of discussion throughout the community, throughout the council, through our council officers. It's one of those situations where we can't provide everything to everybody. And I think the compromise, after being to a meeting with the Progress Association and the council officers, etc. The good thing about this is work is going to start, and I'll ask Ms Farrell later to explain the timelines. But we're going to commit $2 million going forward as leverage funding. We're going to start works on the northern side. There's works already earmarked and funding for the High Street footpath, etc. Now, I know that some letters were sent out and people were concerned that the south side were going to be left behind, but we need to do it responsibly to get the best bang for our bucks. And I can assure that the people of Koroit and the traders on the south side, it will happen. And after, I suppose, the immense in-depth and exciting debate over which way we're going to go, I think what we've got in front of us is the best way. It's not perfect, but it'll be the best outcome in the long term for everybody. So congratulate everyone who's put into this, and to the people of Koroit, those in the Progress Association and others for having their input. And I'll just leave it at that, and I'll ask later, when in summary, for Ms Farrell to explain the timelines so people know what's happening.
Thank you, councillor Dukas. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Been a bit of a journey, bit of a process, and can definitely let the people of Koroit know that council's got their back and we're going all in. So yeah, great to see there's going to be, you know, a lot happen in that space. And obviously we'll be advocating hard for more funds, but bricks and mortar things will be happening soon. Diverse, you know, opinions have come up, but we need to make sure that we can plan for the future and for all the residents and business owners and future generations to enjoy the already great town of Koroit, but make it even better.
Thank you. Are there councillors who would like to speak for or against this motion? Councillor, okay, I'd just like to say a couple of things. I don't like to speak from the chair, but I feel quite passionate about this one. I think during this council term, the people of Koroit have been asking us, just please do something about our footpaths in the main street, please. And we've asked them in all good faith to bear with us, just bear with us a little bit longer and wait, and we'll see if we can leverage the funds we'd already set aside to do that work, to get even more money so we could do even more work. We had the best of intentions, but sadly the timing was bad. It's a terrible time at the moment for government funding. We weren't successful. But now we've got an opportunity here with this decision to make a decision and to move this forward at last. And I'd just like to thank the Koroit community for their patience with us. And I'm very excited at the prospect of finally getting the job done. So well done. If there are no other councillors who'd like to speak for or against that motion, I'll come back to you, Councillor Dukas, as the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, no, there's not much more I can say, but I would like Ms Farrell to explain the timeline, please, so those listening can explain to those that aren't listening exactly the way forward and when things are proposed to happen.
So, thank you. So through the Mayor, in terms of the funding timeline for the submission, and I can talk about the potential construction timeline as well, if that was your question. The expression of interest is due in by the 1st of August. We would hear sometime November, December, whether we had been successful to put in the full funding submission. And then we would put that in, obviously, and then we will hear back by about February. I mean, the federal government timeframe, so you know, a bit of scope on either side of that for the full submission, whether we had been successful, sometime February, March, with an expectation from growing regions that on-site works would commence by May 2024. That's if we got the full $4 million project. In regards, separately to that, in regards to the $1 million that we have in budget already, works will commence as soon as feasible in this current financial year, and that is obviously subject to contractor availability, material supply. So, you know, we've already started to have conversations with Bamstone around materials for paving. We have some paving put aside, so it will be subject to that and in consideration of the tourism and Christmas period and contractor availability. So as soon as practical in this year, this financial year for the next stage of works using the $1 million. And then if we got the funding, the rest of the project, it would be an expectation would start by mid-May next year.
So in a nutshell, as we're going forward, we'll talk to the traders about when we start after Christmas.
Well, so the Koroit District Progress Association have a meeting this week, so I would envisage we will go and have a conversation with them this week. And
by the time we get stone, our contractors, etc., get out of winter, because the Bureau said we're going to have a dry winter, so it'll probably pour rain in spring. Having said that, that's with the traders and their advice going forward, sometime after Christmas, we could get started.
potentially, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're at the point now we can put this to the vote. All those in favour? Well, that is carried 6-0. Thank you. Item 3.1 is the Mayor and Councillors' reports. I will just call for any comments or questions, noting that in the Mayor activities, the 21st of June, Victoria Park Committee meeting, I did not attend. It says I did, but I wasn't. A late apology for that meeting. Are there any other questions? No. Yes, Councillor Lockett.
So just trying to find my spot. The meeting with Senator recently.
Senator Rafchikoni.
Thank you. I was trying to remember Raf, but not Triconi. Yeah, thank you. How did that go?
It was a really positive meeting. The Senator came to Port Fairy as part of a bit of a journey around Western Victoria. He was really enthusiastic, eager to learn about our local issues. We had a really great chat over an hour and a half or so, and encouragingly, he's offered to support us with future advocacy efforts into the federal government. He's essentially our duty senator, if you like, for the western part of the state. So very important contact for us to make and a good relationship to build. But I don't know if you've got anything to add there, Mr. Davis.
Through you, Mayor, very important for us to establish that contact, and the Senator has offered to assist when we next go to Canberra as well, about achieving some other sort of meetings with some key players. But it was important for us to put the Moyne step forward for him, so he's got a greater awareness of the issues that are affecting us on the ground.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. No other questions?
One, please.
Yes, Councillor Dukas.
You probably picked it. Meeting with the Moyne votes yes. I'm assuming that's the what is it? The Voice.
Correct. They requested a meeting with me their request was to join in with some of our NAIDOC week activities and events. And after discussing that with the executive team, we agreed that it was not appropriate for them to join in with NAIDOC. They're two separate things. So that was the outcome of that meeting.
Good outcome. Very well done.
Thank you, Councillor Dukas. There's nothing else in relation to that. We'll move then to, we've done 3.2, move to general matters, and I'll invite any councillors here today to raise items of general business that they may have. Councillor Gleeson.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. Just an indulgence, if I may, for some clarification. After our last meeting, I was the subject of some letters in the paper, which I haven't had the right to reply. So I just want to make 3 quick points, if I may. First point is that Sue and I don't own or operate a business in Koroit. We certainly have an investment property there. Secondly, in relation to conflict of interest in relation to a liquor licensing discussion, there was no application before council on that day to decide on a liquor licence. There was an application for a permit. The matter of liquor licence was raised by Mr. Gurnett, and certainly confirmed that there would be an application by the applicants, and that did lead to some discussion, but at no point did I feel that I had a conflict of interest in relation to that. And thirdly, I'm all in favour of any development in Koroit or anywhere else within the Shire, as long as it's appropriately zoned. So I just wanted to make those quick points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gleeson. Other councillors? Councillor Lockett.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to congratulate the team, the Cultural and Community Development and Communications team on the phenomenal NAIDOC Week program. I think it was the best one I've seen that Moyne Shire rolled out all across the Shire. I had COVID at the time, but Brett Clark was up here and there was a smoking ceremony and there was many movies across the Shire and lots of good events celebrating one of the longest existing culture on earth. What a privilege to attend some of those events. Thank you, man. Well done to the team.
Thank you. Other items of general business? I've just got one. I'd just like to mention, we're in Mortlake today, and I'd just like to mention Australian women's cricketer Georgia Wareham, who hails from Mortlake, who is doing the country very, very proud. And she's making headlines around the world at the moment. And I believe in the latest test, she had a career best bowling performance, taking 3 for 44. So we should all be very proud of Georgia, who is also she previously received the Mayor's Achievement Award and was the 2018 Young Citizen of the Year. So we're all incredibly proud of Georgia. Well done.
Well done.
Item 3.4, urgent business. Is there any? No. We move to item 4, the CEO meeting schedule. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. One correction, the 20th of July. Unfortunately, I was unable to make the Ideas Place pitch night. Other than that, the meeting schedule is as stands. Couple of highlights in there, the Rural Councils Victoria Forum, where we had an opportunity to speak around our key initiatives in Koroit and Mortlake, and also the need for reforms to planning to allow for more housing quickly. And the Food and Fibre Great South Coast Day declaration. I am one of the board members there, but I was asked to MC that forum, and it was a packed day with messages from Minister D'Ambrosio, Powercore, the dairy industry, and a lot of discussion around three-phase power, the future for the region, and how to best sort of capture or enable the renewables in a more positive way, and profiling our very strong and robust agricultural industry. I'll commend the rest of the report, that and the activities report to you, and take questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Davis. Councillor Purcell.
Mine's not as much a question as a thank you to Mr. Davis for his efforts at the Rural Council Victoria. He represented the Shire in great esteem. The Rural Council of Victoria, there were hundreds of councillors from throughout the state. I don't know, to be, hundreds anyway. And, Mr. Davis presented this council in very highly, certainly in regard to the rural housing. And I must admit, I had a number of people commenting to me afterwards, what a great job we're doing. So I'd like to thank him for those efforts. Thank you.
Here. Well said. Okay, so we move to item 5, your activities report, Mr. Davis.
So just through you, Mayor, quickly on the 21st of June, yourself and I presented the Love Local Awards at a special event at the Port Fairy Yacht Club, and it was certainly a highlight of the night to see the winners of the most community focused, the Kirky Hotel, Made in Moyne, the Port Fairy Coffee Roasters, and the Best Customer Service, Black Crow Barbers in Koroit, and the most innovative, which was Electro's Pizza and Bistro. More than 100 businesses were nominated in the community in these categories. There was some really good input, great reception from the public with that regard. It was a terrific evening, recognising our hardworking small businesses. NAIDOC Week, we did, as Councillor Lockett has already attested to, winter weekends, and also the youth program when we had the projections that were on in Port Fairy a couple of weeks ago, incredibly well received, and a number of positive comments to the community. And also to highlight, we've got some upcoming training opportunities with through our Fuse Fund, the Big Connect project. And that will include things such as lifeguard accreditation, which is an essential service for this Shire going forward, with the number of pools that we either operate or lease out for operation. But the attracting local staff, we certainly encourage people to get into that. The youth mental health first training in through August to September, a huge and emerging issue that we need to continually offer services for. And the other one I'll call out is come and try shearing. There's a couple of councillors here that probably appreciate more people having a go at that. But again, we recently had a briefing from our youth coordinator or officer with regards to all the programs that are done in that space, and it's a huge workload, and the efforts are very much commended. I'll leave it there, Mayor, and happy to take questions.
Thanks, Mr. Davies. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Davies. I just had a question regarding the Port Fairy Playground proposal and the consultation which is occurring at the moment. The park run, we're just asking about, I think they've already been in touch with council several times about that process, and just wondering if we could ask about, working in with them as we would obviously intend to do.
Through you, Mayor, and Director Farrell can chime in if I got this wrong, but there has been ongoing consultation, and our officers are working with Parkrun to assist them on any changes that might need to occur, should and when the playground go as planned. But there has been discussions with a number of parties. There was an information day on all day on a Saturday, plus there was a Zoom evening as well. So there's been really positive a consultation across the board with regards to those facilities.
Thank you.
Great. All right. If there is nothing further, Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I see that Minister Melissa Horn, Minister for Roads, was at the Rural Council Victoria. An issue that I think we've raised that many times and continue to raise at the state of the Rural Roads Victoria condition of our road network. Anyone who drives on our roads will agree with the comments I think I'm about to make. They are in bad condition, and we're not seeing any improvement. If we take the Port Fairy to Warrnambool Road, for instance, it is, we've been promised for a decade or more, probably 2 decades, that something's been done. The federal government put a lot of money into it. The state government have promised. We're not seeing any action, and it's just getting worse. And I was just wondering, what are we doing to try to put some pressure on the government to improve our road conditions?
Through you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Purcell, for that question. In the officer sense, I've reached out to the Chief Regional Transport acting person at this stage, and they are preparing a briefing to come back to councillors to update you on where they are with the program. Secondly to that, I suggest that we will be making overtures to Minister Horn's office just around the lack of progress on some of those key roads that you mentioned, that we all experience, and as does our community. So we're working within what we can to have a better and quicker response to the outstanding issues of road quality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durkis.
Yes, thank you. CEO, the correct structure plan, the draft plan should be close to finished. Now it says here that we're going to talk to the affected residents or landowners, etc. Are we going to get a look at that at a workshop, or are you going to talk to those landowners one-on-one? Whereas in the past, from time to time, well, when I say in the past, I suppose no one he was in the past when I was in the past. So I'm well past it, so to speak. We used to have a workshop, sometimes on a different day, where all those people involved would come, and if councillors want to be there, they could pick and choose where they come to go through the structure plan. So have you got that far ahead yet on how we're going to do it, or are we just waiting for the draft to be done before we decide?
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, councillor Dukas. That particular structure plan, we did have long sessions with the residents probably in 2020, and then a few other things have gotten in the way. As they do. My understanding is that the form and content of those areas communicated has not changed. So it is proceeding to be packaged up for an amendment process. But given the span of time in that regard, there would be another workshop opportunity for those people, because people change over that time, to have a look at it before we progress it through to the planning scheme amendment process.
So will those people involved be invited into our workshop on our workshop day, or are we going to hold? Or are we going to pick a different day where interested councillors can come along and all the, I suppose, not applicants, but all those concerned landowners are in the room together, because they will, if they come one at a time, they'll then go out and talk one on one or three, etc., and then they get a bit confused as to what happens. Then they relay something to a councillor and say, well, we're not happy with this. I'm getting it second or third hand, whereas all in the room together would be good.
Through you, Mayor, take that on notice as to the consultation program going forward, other than there will be further consultation before it's packaged off.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. That brings us to the end of our open agenda. We do have 2 confidential items to consider. So I'll call for a motion from the councillor to close the open meeting so that we can do those items. Please, thanks, councillor Costello. Councillor Lockett, all those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. And thank you for those who've been watching along online. We appreciate your patience with our technical issues today.
Yeah, you voted yes.